Welcome to the comeback season, where we have real conversations about fueling your body, rebuilding strength, and stepping back into the life you were meant to live. Whether you've been caring for kids, aging parents, or just lost sight of your own needs, we see you. And this is your season to rise. Hello, my name is Nicole McLeod with Healthy Mind, Healthy Body. I'm a mindset and fitness coach and the author of I Started on a Tuesday. I know what it feels like to lose yourself in the chaos and still hold on to the hope that something better is coming.
And I'm Christi Kelsey from Christi Counts Macros, nutrition and mindset coach and food freedom advocate. I've worked with lots of women who felt stuck, restricted, and unsure where to even begin. Together, we're bringing you honest conversations, healing truths, and real strategies to help you rise again, physically, mentally, and emotionally, whether you've hit rock bottom or you're just tired of putting yourself last. This space is for you because this is your comeback season and it starts right now. Today, we're talking about a subject that isn't always discussed openly. I know our mothers were not having this discussion, but it matters deeply to a lot of midlife women. We're going to approach this conversation with honesty, respect, and care as we explore sexual vitality, health, pleasure, and the changes that can happen in midlife. Let's welcome our guest and expert today, Carla Wainwright. Welcome, Carla, to the comeback season.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. Carla is a holistic wellness coach, sexual awakening facilitator, and midlife alchemist who helps women 40 plus reclaim vitality, balance hormones, and reconnect with pleasure and personal power. Drawing on her background in biology, homeopathy, and more than 20 years in the healing arts, she combines metabolic health, nervous system healing, and sensual embodiment to support women in thriving throughout midlife. Through retreats, group programs, and private coaching, Carla guides women to embrace midlife as a transformative and empowering stage of life. Did I get everything, Carla?
You did. You did.
That's good. So, first, why don't you start off by telling our listeners how you got into this line of work?
Yes. So, like many of us, our paths are not always direct, but everything that we do, of course, just informs and looks like it all comes together, when we reflect back on it. So, my original background is in biology, and I'm trained as a wildlife biologist. But I also did a lot of health sciences biology, and I worked in that field for many years. And then concurrent to that, I really was on my own healing journey to heal from sexual trauma that I'd experienced in my early 20s that really became very destabilizing in my life. So, on the one hand, I was working and I was doing all of the things that, typically a person would do. But at the same time, I was just struggling immensely inside and dealing with a lot of symptoms, but also a lot of mental and emotional challenges and struggles as a result of those experiences. And in that exploration, I found yoga and I
Mhm.
found somatic healing and was kind of blown away by the impact that it was having in my life, and how it was beginning to provide a lot of hope to heal the trauma that I'd experienced. And so I became more and more interested in that work, not only for healing myself, but also the possibility of doing that work and supporting women who had similar experiences to me. And it really just led me to a career shift. And so I opened a yoga studio and I became a sexual awakening facilitator and a sex, love, and relationship coach. And did this work for many years and was really wonderful. And then I hit midlife, and then all the things that happen midlife with our hormones and shifts and changes happened to me, as it does for most women. And I really realized I needed to start exploring my own healing journey through an enhanced lens. And that really brought me back to my biology background of becoming much more interested in metabolic health, in hormones, in the science aspect, and merging that with the work that I was doing in terms of, somatic healing and energy healing. And so it really helped me come first full circle. And I think having a scientific background was really helpful because it just allowed me and continues to allow me to take in information, really understand it from those scientific principles and distill it down in ways, of course, that is more accessible to others. And then bringing in, of course, the embodiment piece, the somatic piece, and the healing piece. I think, merging those two together at this phase of my life has been enormously exciting and empowering, because I think that we need both, right? We need the more esoteric, but we also need the scientific. There's value in
Mhm.
everything. And so that's really where I'm at today, of really kind of coming full circle and bringing all of these life experiences and educational pieces into the work that I do today.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really good. I find that a lot of people in our line of work where we're kind of coaching or healers, like we've all had experiences that have, not everybody, but most people have personal experiences that have brought them into this work. And I think that's really important for people we work with to understand. Maybe I haven't gone through the exact thing you have, but I've had my own experiences to add to this. So that's really good. For Will you explain to our listeners about what your somatic healing looks like?
Mm-hmm. So, well, somatic is really all about the body. The soma is
Mhm.
the body. And so,
Mhm.
somatic healing is really about tapping into the deep wisdom that your body has, of wanting to come into a place of balance, of wholeness, of
Mhm.
vibrancy, and supporting the body to do that. We all have that, but it actually, for many of us, is something that we don't feel very connected to or we don't really understand. And
Mhm.
so in somatic healing, it is reawakening that connection and understanding of your deep body, the deep wisdom of your body, and doing that through really what we begin with is, of course, nervous system regulation, of attuning into, what is your body actually experiencing. For so many of us, especially people who experience trauma, they're very much separated from what's happening in their bodies. That's a protective mechanism. So coming back home to sensation, coming back home to being able to feel at various different levels and titrating that in a very safe and doable way, and
Mhm.
then coming into that wisdom of the body, because we're holding stories and messages and experiences in our body. And the way that we liberate past suffering or trauma is to actually get in tune and touch with those messages and allow them to move through us. So,
Mhm.
through nervous system work, through embodiment practices, through breath work, through movement, all of these things contribute to that kind of overall picture of somatic healing.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. The more I learn about the body and the brain and how they work together, the more in awe I am of what incredible and complicated creatures we are.
Yes.
You have a phrase that I just find so beautiful, the second spring. What does that mean, and why is that such a powerful way to view midlife?
hmm So I cannot take credit for that at all. That's actually a Taoist term. Comes from Chinese medicine, and it's
Mhm.
very, very old. The second spring was actually written about in a large volume of books written by the Yellow Emperor 3000 BC. So it's a long, long, long time ago. And the second spring is what is referred to as the phase that a woman enters in menopause, and such a beautiful term. The reason they call it the second spring is because rather than this phase being seen as a loss, it's a redirection of energy. So when a woman is younger, she, of course, has her cycle and she menstruates. And that blood, which is a very important energy source, we lose that through either our menstruation or creating a new life. But of
Mhm.
course, once menopause happens, we no longer do that. And so the
Mhm.
energy is then redirected up towards the heart and is available to a woman in any way that she chooses, really from what I see as like a generative, a creative capacity. And so the second spring is this opportunity for a woman to take that energy and instead of losing it or creating a new life with it, she creates life for herself.
Mhm.
So it is this really beautiful time in a woman's life where she has access to a part of herself that wasn't available before. And she can really use it in whatever, vibrant, exciting, empowering way that she chooses.
Mhm. Kind of like the comeback season.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's why I'm drawn to that phrase so much because I mean, Nicole's my co-host, we just feel so drawn to this phrase, the comeback season, because we're both in that stage of life and we feel a change within ourselves in our own personal stories. And so many women that we've interviewed and talked to are feeling that as well. And it can be a wide range um, of things that we're dealing with. It might be a shift in identity or a shift in your relationship or circumstances. There's so many different ways. Um, so let's talk about um, the hormones. What changes? How does that affect us? We're talking about sexual vitality today. How does that play into the big picture of this stage of life?
Yeah, so of course, as a woman moves through perimenopause, her hormones are changing quite dramatically,
Mhm.
as dramatically as they did when we moved into puberty. So it can be a very um, difficult time to navigate. Some women sail through it without any issue, but I would say that the vast majority of women that I talk to, struggle with this shift in hormones. So, of course, estrogen and progesterone are declining, as is testosterone. And it can be really rocky because our moods change, our weight can change, our relationship to our body can change, our libido changes. All of these things really go through a period of flux. For women who are listening, I just want to say the good news is when you get to the other side of menopause, after several years, things begin to settle down. So this isn't something that is going to last, forever until, your last moment. But that transition, excuse me, is very, very difficult. And when our hormones are really in flux like this, like I said, it can feel very destabilizing. And what overlays on top of that makes the picture even more difficult, and this probably relates a lot to the work that you do, is that our metabolic health really
Mhm.
has a huge impact also on our hormones and our sexuality. They're really inseparable. And I think
Mhm.
that it's actually a really big piece of the conversation around women's vitality that is missing. So, yes, our hormones are going to shift and change. That is part of our biological design. But it's often made so much more challenging by poor metabolic health, by blood
Mhm.
sugar instability, by chronic inflammation, by toxins, by all of these things that are, we're very much assaulted by in our environment, which leaves the body in a pretty much in a constant stress state. And our
Mhm.
bodies were designed to experience acute stress and then resolution, but not be in chronic stress. And I would say that most women today, and especially in that perimenopausal time and then into menopause often, is that we're just living in a state of chronic stress. So, what happens is that when we're in that chronic stress, it impacts our hormones even more. It makes the shifts even bigger and harder to handle. And then your body, because your body has this incredibly wise intelligence, it will always prioritize survival over pleasure.
Mhm.
So, what that means is it's going to directly impact libido, it's going to impact arousal, lubrication, sensitivity, emotional openness, all of these things. So, we're already in flux. We have all of these other inputs that make it feel even bigger. And then we wonder why we feel flat, why we don't have desire, why we just are struggling perhaps in our relationships or even, in a relationship to our own changing bodies. So, I think it's a really important part of the conversation. Like, yes, hormones is one big piece of it, but metabolic function, helping our bodies kind of move and navigate through this phase in a world that is stressful, has a lot of, difficult things happening, of course, and personally, and then, of course, globally as well. How do we navigate that so that we are able to support the body to move through this transition and not be in that chronic stress state? I think is really, really important.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that because what I see with the nutrition side of things, I mean, a lot of women come to me, they want fat loss, but they're already under eating. And that is really stressful on a body. And it's like you said, the body prioritizes survival. So if it's not getting enough calories, just like you said, other things start to not function as well. So it's all related.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are some signs that you see in women that her metabolism may be affecting her mood or her desire or energy?
Yeah. So certainly, one of the big things are these kind of highs and lows through the day. And feeling like you need to be fueling the body continuously just because you're crashing all the time.
Hmm.
So, a lot of signs of blood sugar instability, inflammation in the body, aches and pains. Those can really get exacerbated in perimenopause as well. And yeah, the big piece really is also around stress and just not being able to handle. Often, what happens, as women enter their 40s, is things that might not have been such a big deal in their 30s or 20s. Suddenly, you just feel like you don't have the capacity to deal with what seem like
Hmm.
small stressors. And navigating that. Poor sleep is a huge one. And of course, we
Hmm.
need good sleep for recovery. We need good sleep to be able to modulate our insulin response, all of these sorts of things. So
Hmm.
that's another big one. And then I would say, so many women just say that they lose their desire, their libido kind of flatlines. They're not interested in sex. They're not really even interested in, emotionally, like they find that a lot of their connections feel flat, that they're just struggling kind of making those deeper emotional connections, whether they're sexual or not. Those
Hmm.
are some of the pieces that I feel have a lot of metabolic health influence.
Hmm.
Um, those are the kinds of things that I hear women talk about quite frequently.
Yeah. And are there one or two things that you kind of recommend to everybody, or is it just on a case by case basis?
Yeah, well, I certainly think there's some underlying principles that are helpful for everyone. So one of the big ones is to have like a 12-hour digestive rest window at a minimum. So so whether if you start eating at 7, you finish by 7, and just giving your body that period of digestive rest
Mm.
can be really, really powerful. One of the things it also does is when we don't eat just before bed, we're going to sleep better. We're not going to have a glucose spike. After we've gone to bed, our sleep will be less disrupted. And as I think we all know, like sleep is like the one of the most important things in our life,
Mhm.
and in terms of just wellness and being able to manage the next day effectively. So that's a big one. And I would also say that a lot of women are not getting enough protein, and
Mhm.
protein can be really helpful. It helps with satiety, of course. It helps to regulate blood sugar, really, really important. So, those are some of the metabolic things that I think that are fairly universal. Of course, every woman is different. And when I work with women one-on-one, we're very, of course, lasering in on what that particular woman needs. But yeah, from a metabolic standpoint, those are really important. And I know we're probably going to talk a little bit more about pleasure here, but being really mindful about pleasure and how we connect to pleasure every day actually does have a big metabolic impact, because
Mm.
oxytocin is really the antidote to stress and cortisol. Cortisol, of course, affects insulin, it affects our sex hormones, all of these things. So, everything, as you know, is interconnected. So,
Yeah.
in my metabolic plans with women, pleasure is also a really big piece of the
Mhm.
puzzle in terms of getting them to feel more vibrant in their bodies.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. That sounds like a great transition into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so pleasure as medicine. How is that what happens in the body when we experience pleasure?
So, pleasure, I think that we often think of it as just something that's like emotional or relational, but it is really biochemical, right? So,
Mhm.
when the body experiences genuine pleasure, there's this beautiful cascade of hormones that happens in the body. So, we get oxytocin, we get dopamine, endorphins. All of those things directly support healing. They lower inflammation, reduces cortisol immediately in the body. You become more insulin sensitive
Mhm.
just from having a really pleasurable experience. Now, I should say that pleasure will often equate to, I think in our culture, we think like pleasure has to be sexual. Absolutely not. Pleasure, and if pleasure isn't the right word for you, you can use like joyful or feels good or whatever that is. But, for
Mhm.
today, we'll just say that pleasure has a very broad spectrum of experiences. Some of them certainly could be related to sexual pleasure, but there's so many more ways that we experience pleasure that are non-sexual entirely. And so when we
Mhm.
have these feel good experiences, we do have that incredible cascade of hormones that directly impact biochemically our body in the moment. The thing to remember is that oxytocin in particular only has a half life of 2 to 3 minutes. So it's really
Mhm.
short. And
Mhm.
so, what does that mean? Well, it's great, we get that little boost, but it means that we have to prioritize finding pleasure throughout our day. Can't be
Mhm.
like you have your checklist. Maybe like you've got your checklist, like, okay, I'm going to do the 12-hour digestive rest. I'm going to eat protein, check, check. Well, I have my one oxytocin moment. I'm done for the day. It doesn't work like that. We need to be kind of sprinkling it out throughout our day so that we're continually getting that biochemical input that's
Mhm.
having that beautiful cascade and effect in our
Mhm.
bodies, and using pleasure as one of the ways that the body really restores and heals itself by being intentional and bringing it into our life, yeah, throughout our day as much as possible.
I love that. A few years ago, this just reminded me of this experience I had a few years ago. I love the fall and I live in an area that has lots of trees, and there's a little trail about a mile away from my house, and I started going over there in the mornings after school started up again, and just every day things were changing. The weather was cooling down, the leaves started changing, and then they started falling off, and I had my little playlist, and I would go walk this 2-mile trail every single day, and it brought me so much joy, and I would say pleasure, because pretty soon I started to feel like I was addicted to going on this trail, that every day I had to go on this trail because I loved it so much, the feeling of finishing up and all of the beauty around me and the fresh air, and you can smell the dirt and the pine needles and all of that stuff, and I could see how that kind of experience could produce similar results as something like sexual pleasure. Um,
Yeah.
it was it was just a really wonderful season of my life where I had the time to go to that trail almost every single day, and if I missed, it was I really felt it. But what are some other things outside of sexual pleasure that bring women that you work with pleasure and joy?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say that, nature is the ultimate healer. And,
Mm,
you know, as humans, we do have, even though often we feel separated from nature, we have a very strong innate connection to nature, and it is really, really powerful. So I
Mm.
love how you describe that experience. I could see your face light up and just in the remembrance of that. And I should say
Yeah.
that when we remember those experiences, like pleasurable experiences, we get those hormones moving through our
Mm.
bodies again, right? So your remembering of that is bringing back in all those good feelings,
Mhm.
which is incredible. And you also just touched on the senses, which I think is also something really, really important that I always emphasize in the work I do with women I work with. So you talked about the smells, and you were seeing all of the beauty around you. So our senses are such a powerful way to relate to pleasure. We have five
Mhm.
senses, and each one has its own unique experience or vibe to it. So when you're outside in nature, you're seeing whatever beautiful nature things that are there. You're hearing perhaps bird song or the wind. You're smelling the earth. You might be touching different things. You might even have a sense of taste in your mouth. All of these things are so, so powerful. So one of the practices that I share over and over again is letting your senses be your guide for pleasure. And
Mm.
so maybe it's standing in the shower and closing your eyes and just really feeling the warm water pour over
Mm.
your skin. So sensual. It's really, and the warmth feels so good. And just dropping
Mhm.
into that. Maybe it's really listening to the sound of that. Maybe it's listening to your child laugh in just pure joy and enjoying that. Slowing down when you eat, really savoring the taste of whatever you have in front of you. So that is like one of the most powerful and yet easy ways to connect with pleasure that doesn't need to be sexual. We're doing it every single day. Like maybe you take
Mm.
your first sip of coffee, and instead of doing it absent-mindedly and thinking about the 10 million things you have to do, that you actually really taste it. You really
Yeah.
smell it. You really slow down because we're doing things all day that could be pleasurable, but because we get so distracted and caught up with, all of the busyness of the mind, we miss out. So, in many ways, it's not that finding more pleasure takes more time in your day. It doesn't because you're already doing
Mhm.
it. It's just being
Mhm.
mindful and recognizing those moments and actually just taking them in and savoring them. So, my advice is just start to pay attention. What are the things related to your five senses that you can do every day and see if you can really have at least five sensory experiences related to pleasure. And then at the end of the day, recall those in your mind. So just as you were doing, recalling walking in on that trail and getting that, rush of oxytocin again, just in recalling those moments that you had in your day, you're going to bring another rush of oxytocin into the body and all of those feel good hormones.
Yeah, I love that. Such an easy thing to start where what you're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Anything else you'd like to add while we're on this topic?
I guess I just really want to emphasize that pleasure is the antidote to stress for women. And
Mm.
remembering, though, that your body is going to prioritize survival. So we are hardwired, especially as women, to choose stress over pleasure. That's a biological evolutionary design that kept us,
Mhm.
safe and allowed us to get, where we are today.
Yeah.
But we have conscious thought and we can choose differently. So if you know that pleasure is the antidote to stress, then can you just allow yourself to interrupt the pattern of stress by being mindful and choosing, consciously choosing pleasure, even when it might not be the easy choice? I just really
Mhm.
want to empower women to know that as stressed out as you may feel, you have that antidote within you, and it's just about making a conscious choice and choosing yourself.
Yes. Yes. As you're talking about that, I'm thinking of boundaries, personal boundaries that like give yourself this space. And sometimes that means telling other people no. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're saying, we're so used to taking care of other people. And I actually thought about this earlier when you were talking about sleep and how, um, you have children and you're just always on the verge of being awake, even in the middle of the night, because a child might cry out and need you. And I had three kids. They were all about 2 years apart, and just it took me a long time to get into a pattern where I wasn't constantly waking up in the night and, perking up to hear who's crying for me. Um, and it took me a long time to learn how to sleep again without waking up to these imaginary cries
Yes.
in the night. But it's just like we're so used to taking care of everybody else that we put um, our own self at a little bit of a risk with our health. And I think midlife is a time for us to reclaim that. And like you said, it's the second spring. It's our time to have a rebirth, and you use that energy for the things that we want. And it's not that we are not taking care of anybody else now, but it's our time to do the things that we didn't get to do in other stages of life.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we have to be really intentional to claim that. I do
Yes.
think that the second spring is the opportunity for a woman to step into the most powerful and potent time of her life, where
Hmm.
she's done the child rearing, she's done the taking care of other people. I mean, not 100%, of course, but it just shifts into, it looks
Hmm.
different. And her capacity to choose herself really comes to the forefront for the first time in her life. And
Hmm.
I think that we do need to be intentional about that because, we have so much to offer and give. We have so much wisdom and life experience and capacity. And, rather than, society telling us that we're diminished and, life is the best years are behind us, which I think is ridiculous, we have this opportunity to step into our second spring. And, just
Hmm.
like you said, where you had to kind of retrain yourself with your sleep,
Hmm.
we can retrain ourselves to really step into that second spring, to prioritize ourselves, to come into the best years with as much vibrancy and vitality as possible, and really make that a conscious and empowering choice.
Yes. So the last uh, topic we have here is that the comeback starts in our body.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have more to say about that?
Yes, so the body, what a miracle this body is that we have that does so many things that I think we just sort of take it for granted. And at the same time, so many women, including myself, really spent years overriding. We spend years
Mhm.
overriding our bodies, so we push through fatigue, we ignore signals, we disconnect from sensation, and we get into a pattern where um, we just override, the wisdom of the body. And so the pathway to come back into yourself and to come into the comeback season, the second spring, is really through the body, through welcoming in pleasure, through sensation awareness, connecting to small moments that feel meaningful, and beginning to reawaken a nervous system that is resourced, that is like able to take in life fully. And so this is we spend so much time connecting to our minds because our minds are powerful, but there is so much power within the body. So the comeback really is there, of welcoming yourself back into this incredible physical vessel,
Mhm.
and reconnecting to the deep, deep wisdom that is there and available to you.
Yeah, I agree. I had an experience about six, no, 5 years ago. I was diagnosed with colon cancer during the pandemic, and I had to have two surgeries to get it all, and it was not a fun recovery. But the night before my second surgery, I just had this kind of wake up call of nobody else is going to take care of this body
Mm.
but me. And I just had this overwhelming love and appreciation for my body and all that it had been through. I grew three babies in my womb and had them all by C-section, and my body healed from that. I had endometrial cancer and had surgery for that and healed and had um, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in my early 20s, and that's gone almost into complete remission. Just so many things that my body had been through, and just felt like, okay, I'm going to start taking better care of you now.
Yeah.
And not just, trying to be what other people want me to be all the time, or what I perceived other people want me to be. And I want to be strong. I want to be as healthy as I can. And I feel so much better now in my early 50s than I did even in my 20s.
Yeah.
Um, so it really does start with taking care of your own person, your own body. And there's always that analogy of you have to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help somebody else. And it really does put you in a better place to serve and um, love and help other people if you are taken care of.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean, physically, emotionally, mentally. We've talked a lot about different things today, and it's the whole person. And now, if you're in midlife, this is the season. This is the season to reinvent yourself and to come back to yourself um, and reach those goals and that potential that you have.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing some of your story with me. And yes, like we just have one body in this lifetime,
Mhm.
and we most of that inner script in our minds around our bodies is pretty negative, and
Mhm.
so there's an opportunity for each and every one of us to shift that into, as you were saying, deep appreciation, gratitude for this body that has gone through so much, and support it to just be the best version that it possibly can be. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. Well, Carla, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Have you been able to share everything you wanted to tell us today?
I don't know if I could ever say that. There's always so much, but I do think today we touched upon a lot of really important
Yeah,
pieces around, yeah, women just being vibrant in her body and reconnecting to pleasure. And I just want women to know that even if you're feeling numb or flat or just you're really struggling, that your
mhm.
body's innate wisdom knows how to come back to that sense of vibrancy and vitality, and your body's always looking to do that. So never give up on yourself. That the potential is absolutely always there.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I know a lot of women are going to feel seen today and have encouragement and hope, and maybe even um, look at this season of life in a whole new way. So thank you for being here and for sharing your wisdom. Where can our listeners find you?
So they can find me. Actually, the best place is to go to vibrancyreset.com, and that has a free vibrancy guide. It goes over 5 of my best tips to really reconnect with that beautiful life force energy that you have. I talk about pleasure, I talk about metabolism, and that takes you right to my website. So vibrancyreset.com, and then you'll find me there. And you can reach out anytime. I just love hearing and connecting with women who are on this journey of the second spring.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I will definitely be checking out that um, free gift. And it's been such a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for being with us, and thank you to our listeners. If this episode spoke to you, be sure to share it with a friend who may need this conversation too. And we will see you again on the comeback season.
Thank you for joining us on the comeback season. Please remember, the conversations we share here are for informational and motivational purposes only. We are not licensed medical professionals, and this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace guidance from your doctor or your healthcare provider. Always consult your healthcare team before making changes to your nutrition, your fitness, or your mental health routines. Your health and well-being comes first, and we want you to move forward safely with the right support for your journey.